Hey, everybody, and welcome to another Loose Keys podcast. It has been a little while since we've released one of these, but on this episode, I'm here with Jake Williams and Brad Stark. What's up, guys?
Hey. How we doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Jake. How are you?
I was like, people can't hear the thumbs up.
Right, yeah. The audio needs to hear you to even switch to the camera.
Okay, so I begin talking like this, and then I give the thumbs up.
There you
slowly thumbs up into frame, yeah.
Jake and I, I guess our heads have been down. We've been working on a lot of different jobs, so we just haven't been able to hop on the mic and, I guess, talk about our work. So it feels good to bring Stark on, who recently helped with a job that we finished about a month ago. Maybe kind of recap this and some of our experience with it.
Yeah, and if you're watching the video version, then you see the background. I don't live in a box fort necessarily, but I'm also moving, so it's been like trying to find even free time to plan this has been tough. So glad we can finally do it now.
Mm-hmm. So this job we recently finished, it was entirely 3D based, except for, I guess, our characters. They were 2D based, but we kind of brought them in and out of our 3D environment. Now, we have done a few 3D jobs with the drone videos we've worked on and things like that, but those have been kind of half 2D and half 3D. This was quite an undertaking for us here at LooseKeys, who primarily live and breathe After Effects.
Yeah, this is one of those cases where I think even we've done a podcast episode or two before talking about getting into 3D and kind of adding that to our pipeline a little bit. And it's always been, I think everybody starts, or Stark, you might know this more. Like, I think that everybody kind of starts by doing the cell renderer thing or the sketch and tune thing, where you're like, I just figured out how to do a little bit of geometry. I really don't know how to lighten texture, so I'm just going to slap this on there, and at least I got some depth, you know.
Yeah, maybe. Honestly, I think most people probably just start with the shiny balls, right? With the high reflections and stuff like that. But because of what you guys do specifically, you gravitated immediately towards the cell shading style. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And this recent job, it didn't use that cell renderer. We did have to kind of light it to some degree, but it was a little more flat, and we were going for that isometric look to it overall. So it was we didn't have to worry a lot about shadows and, I guess, making sure textures were right and all that kind of stuff, which I think benefits us a lot, especially going into 3D projects when you can kind of take baby steps with it rather than, hey, make a Star Wars kind of thing. Like, you're just overwhelmed.
I know when I made Star Wars,
back in my day,
back when I was making Star Wars, right?
And if I remember correctly on this particular job, I don't know that we did a whole lot of lighting. I actually think that I lit some of these models, quote unquote, lit them like I would texture an object in 2D in Illustrator or something, where basically like I assigned the colors I wanted to the faces of the polygons. Mm-hmm. I can't quite, now I'm forgetting if we threw a light on there too for a little bit more variation, but yeah.
There is, because I remember specifically that I was messing around with rotating buildings and things, and I was like, oh, well, if I rotate just the building, the lighting stays flat, but if I rotate the whole scene or rotate the camera around, like, we get better lighting variance.
Yeah, and we did have we had the shadows in there as well. So there was something casting and receiving shadows in those scenes as well.
But so early on in the process of this whole thing, after Jake, we did the storyboards from it, I think we realized we were going to need help. Like, we needed someone with a little more 3D knowledge than both of us have. We can get our way through a lot of different things, but having someone that can come in and help us maybe plan out some things and fix some of the issues we were running into without having to message friends and post on the forums every few hours. Like, how do we fix this thing? That's where someone like Stark came in, and knowing those people, especially here in Chicago, and friends and freelancers you can bring into your studio or out there, it can help elevate your projects and just make them so much better when you can bring someone in with a little more knowledge to help out to bring things up to speed.
Yeah, in the beginning of this job, like when we started doing the styles and like figuring out a little bit of modeling. Actually, we had a job previous to this where we also did buildings, and I did it with like bools to like cut out windows and very, very simple things, and it was fine. But when I would show it to friends that knew what they were doing, they're like, "Why didn't you just model this?" And I was like, "Well, it's because I don't know how."
Yeah, I think I actually was brought in to do a little bit on that job too, and I had to go back and fix because of the way you guys were doing the shading on the building with the bools. Like I had to go in and I think paint some to fix some render errors because of the way it was specifically done.
Yeah. So it was interesting when we started making models for this, and then we looked at how actually like varied some of the scenes are. I think we broke it down into a structure where there were like 5 basically sets, like locations we would build, and we would use pieces from each set like to build out whatever little world we're doing. I was starting to ask around 3D friends, including Stark, like, hey, how often do you like go get a model for a client and that's good enough? How often do you do like custom modeling and stuff? Like, should I really be learning this kind of stuff? Because it clearly like feels like if we want it to match, we should just model it all. It was a huge undertaking. Actually, this was I think we didn't know what we got into when we started this,
and we kept running into instances where we would need more models. We were like, oh, we can't keep seeing the same car as every car. We need some variance here, and so we kept having to, like, Brad would suddenly make a quick truck, or you would quickly make a van or something.
And that process of like making little quick things benefited from the style that was slightly, I wouldn't say low poly, but it was flat enough that you could get away with stuff not being 100%, which again helps you like just learn the tools. Like, okay, I know how to make a truck that sort of works. Don't look under the hood, but it looks like a car when you're far enough away.
Right. It was so, I don't want to say simplistic, but it was so, we were so far away that basic modeling and basic shapes went a long way. And in fact, we would have to sometimes add detail to help show that stuff was moving.
Right.
Like we would have the cars and we would have the cars on the road, and technically they would be moving, but we'd be like, well, how do we know? So I remember specifically I had to go in and add like rims.
Because otherwise they're just, they're cylinders basically of the wheel. So you can't tell that a black tube is rotating without lighting or some sort of rim and something in there, spokes.
Right.
Yeah. And it's like, I always thought of it, we did it like in an isometric type of view. And so I always thought of it like a children's play set kind of thing, because like Stark said, the view is so far away that the objects were like simple enough that it was more about their silhouette and what they showed that you think they're doing, rather than like, I don't know, there's a forklift or something and I need to see the individual gears moving and that the guy inside can actually move the handles kind of thing. We probably got carried away on some details. I know there was one piece of equipment somebody was on that specifically like had treads that moved and actually had some might have been a vibrate tag on separate parts of it, but it's so far away you barely notice that like these pieces are moving. Like, I appreciate that it's there, but it's just getting the point across that there's like this type of equipment is in the scene.
Yeah, some of those details, like that, or any kind of details like that, when you tell someone else, they're like, oh yeah, I didn't notice, and like, damn it, but it was cool, I spent the time and did it and figured it out.
Yeah. And I think a big help with bringing in Stark, and I think a big help with this project, was that we need to be okay with like saying that we have limits, or like we only know up to a certain point of knowledge. And when we're trying to do something new, especially when the deadline's going to be what it is, we kind of need to call in an expert. We need to call in somebody who actually has that skill set, because not that we're like the type of people that are like, we'll never admit that we have no faults and we don't know anything, but it's helpful to build a team for a specific project. If you know somebody can come in and like, Stark, you were that person for this, like definitely like any little questions, like we might know the knowledge of how it should be applied, but when it comes to actually doing the work and making it work, that's where we would lean pretty heavily on you for some of this stuff.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we had things like the big crane that I had to go in and rig and figure out how that was going to move the right way, and I think even putting the locators and the nulls and where the eventually the 2D characters would go in some of these scenes, that was something that I brought to it. And yeah, just like camera moves too. Like, yes, we're in this isometric world, but the camera still needs to move around. And how do you do that? And it's be cohesive, right? And not be confusing.
Well, and an early limitation we found out was that Cinema 4D has a lot of camera types, so you can quickly get isometric or whatever you might want for the staging you're looking for the composition you're looking for. But After Effects doesn't recognize that, so you can't pull in those cameras. So we ended up going with a plain old parallel camera, and essentially like what made the focal length crazy long and put it about in the position that matched. You kind of like test a bunch to see if it fit, but so that was a pretty big challenge, especially trying to get nulls to stick for characters to actually be in the positions they need to. And it was even a bigger pain when a building needed to rotate and a character needs to appear on like one face and not the other face, or a vehicle's moving and the character's in the vehicle and you got to move them with it as well as the camera. Like those sorts of things are like, Stark, what is happening? Can you please help us with this thing?
When I originally asked Stark, or we brought Stark in, I thought Jake and I would maybe like do these rough cuts or get everything kind of together and then kind of, hey, Stark, can you help us clean up these scenes? But the way we ended up breaking it up was we almost all each took a third of this video, and then the knowledge just kept, I guess, moving around. Like, oh, what did someone add to this scene? We'll bring into this scene. Oh, hey, what broke here? And then it gets broken elsewhere or added into another scene. So that it ended up working out. Maybe not the pipeline that some studios might do, where someone does a rough cut and then you have like a finishing team or something like that. But when you're just 3 people on a 3-minute 3D job, yeah, you kind of all just do everything at once.
We also had a lot of back and forth as far as models and material that we were using in one scene and go to the next scene. So a lot of that knowledge was still being shared for the other scenes, but it would be like, well, here's this truck that I did with the vibrate tag and with the, with the treads that move. And here's the drone that I animated in a certain way, and you can use that too. And all that kind of stuff.
And something we realized later, we probably should have used instances of some of these models. That was something we didn't plan for. It's just Stark, what is that, or what's the best way for that to get used in something like this?
So, I mean, if you're going to have a model that's being used repeatedly across different scenes and across different, even within the same scene multiple times, if you use an instance or an XREF, you can just have that one model and make changes to that one model, and then it proliferates across everything.
So it works the same way like a pre-comp might.
Yeah.
Or if I use this instance, a pre-comp of like an animation I did and a bunch of things in After Effects, then I change one, it changes all of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly what that is.
Yeah. I think another big thing I learned early on that showed how much of a novice I was, at least in the software and modeling and that kind of stuff, was one of your first comments, Stark, when you sat down, was like, these scenes are really big. I think my scale of things was, I didn't pay attention to any of that. I just sort of was like, I know the model I want to make. I'll zoom the camera back. It'll fit, whatever. And it wasn't an issue going for the look for the boards. But then once we start animating and we decide, oh, we want a little bit of grain in the shadow and like we want it to look a certain way. Suddenly it's more of a problem, because now this thing's huge. You got to like either have a giant light or move it further, or it's also going to take way more processing power to render that huge object. Thankfully, they're simple, but calling in someone that actually knows what they're doing can help me understand, at least, even if it didn't happen for this project, like in future projects, now I have a better idea of like, hey, maybe it doesn't need to be a gigantic chunk of street that's just a couple cubes. Like it can be pretty small.
Yeah. And there's, the great thing about the 3D program that we used is it uses real world measurements. So you can say this thing is 10 centimeters. This thing is 5 meters tall. You can do that. And that's a good, way to be consistent across everything. And then when you go, you're like, oh, well, these shadows need to be, this good. Yeah. This good shadow.
This good.
Yeah,
Shadows are measured in goodness.
Yeah, no. After we were done with the project, we said only good shadows from here on out.
Yeah,
There's
not less good shadows.
Yeah.
Just good shadows or better
across the board.
Yeah.
But Jake, I like that we keep moving stepping up a little bit every time with each one of these 3D jobs we kind of take on, and pretty soon we'll be able to, have actual lights in our shots and reflections and things like
Right.
that. So that's kind of our next phase. But it's always important that we kind of keep it also within our style and our, expertise a little bit, that we're not totally out there. But it's nice.
But what's really cool is I think you can, a good reference would be like what we did with the half-res stuff. And then even, I would look at another Chicago studio, Run Kick Shout, that also did the half-res graphics this year. It's like sometimes you might do a little bit of a different style than you're known for, or at least in a different medium, but you can start to apply your look and your feel, even if it is a different thing. And I think we achieved that with the project we're talking about today. Like we got to do the 2D characters that we're used to. That was a lot of fun. Stark probably knew, but like basically to get to the point of like hiring Stark on for the job, it was me like grinding on tutorials, trying to figure out how to learn to model. So I had some models to hand off, So I think it's definitely cool that we're diving into these new avenues. We should probably do it more frequently for practice, because if we dove into another one today, I don't know that I'd be equipped. We'd be calling Stark right back.
I'm not helping anymore. I'm done.
Well, our client for this video did like it so much that we sounds like we're going to be doing another one, so we can kind of take some of those things like the instances, and we realized early on, Jake, the characters, since they were all animated in 2D and they were completely tiny. I think you went and animated 20 different characters. You don't see them move very much once you're in some of these seeds, and the painstaking keyframes that get added in After Effects are like, that guy looks the exact same, even though his walk cycle is slightly different.
So this is probably the first project I can think of, though, that we had like, let's call it an army of characters, where there was like 3 or 4 heroes, and those ones have specific movements for the camera shots they're on when they're actually close. But we don't typically have like tons and tons of background characters like this, which is really what every character that's not a hero was in this. And so it was nice to, even though, a lot of animation happened, they're not doing wacky things on this project, so they don't need to move around a ton. But it was like, was basically building out like no characters on screen longer than 20 seconds. So let's do 30 to 40 seconds of animation per design we have. And then if we need to, we can offset stuff. We can change colors or comps or any of that kind of thing to get us more variety to get there. Because I think, we would probably say, I don't want to say 90, but like a huge portion of this job was the 3D.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you're flying by in a 3D camera, like in our zooms and stuff, you're focused on that more than the character who like looks at his iPad for a second.
Right.
But Stark, any other thoughts on it? How was coming in and looking at the mess of our files that we created in here to get to where this project ended up being?
Yeah, it wasn't so bad. It was like, honestly, Jake, you keep down talking your knowledge base of 3D, but it actually was, when I came to it, there was quite a lot done correctly. There was other things that I had to specifically go in and do, like mess with scaling that we kind of talked about. There's also like, it was like, maybe it's not something you think about, but like, hey, like in this scene, this truck is gigantic. Like this truck, consider if this character is this big, how big is this truck that's right behind it?
Right.
Like, and I think I messed around, Brad. Do you remember messing around with the ambulance? And I was like, this ambulance is way too big or way too small. Remember?
Yeah, it may have looked fine in our frames or our style frames for the client.
Right.
But then when you're in there, it's like, no, that's not right. It can't roll up and be basically a monster truck.
It's not a monster truck ambulance. Yeah.
All things to learn.
There's stuff like that, but I think you picked up a lot of everything I was explaining pretty well, and then it went pretty smoothly.
Mm-hmm. And it was good.
I was gonna say, it was also good that you were in the office, because like as we were animating, it was nice to have questions that could be answered, quickly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it was quick. It was easy to grab a lot of stuff from each other's files. Like I know StartGid built the MoGraph road that came out, and it was easy enough to like grab that and like, oh, you know what? This scene didn't have the road build on, but you know what? We have it built, so let's just grab it and rotate it and put it where it needs to go. So things like that helped fill out some of these scenes, because we quickly realized as we got more into the project that like, oh yeah, we need more trucks, we need more stuff to move just to keep it lively. And that's, I think, always a problem when you're animating, especially in a video. You quickly realize like, this needs more. I've looked at this 100 times. Like, let's add a plant here. Let's put a lamp on this desk and have it flicker a little bit. But
adding small details.
But it was definitely fun. Good challenge. Hopefully we'll able to share this project at some point down the line, waiting for approval and it to officially get released. I believe it was just an internal video at this point, but it's nice to talk about it and share some thoughts.
I do think, am I correct in saying that we have one clip that was approved that's in our reel? So if you do want to see a tiny bit of it.
Yeah, there is a clip in the reel. So if you can decipher which project isn't one of the other ones, which one doesn't belong.
I think it's pretty clear if you look at our reel.
It's the 3D one.
So it's very early in there, and it's the 3D shot, yes. There's some other 3D shots in our reel as well.
Yeah, you got some drone stuff in there. Is the Half-Res stuff in there at all?
I don't know. No. Very cool. Well, yeah, always great having Stark in. Appreciate you helping us out on this job. It's a bummer for us that you're now working full time.
Yeah, it's new as of 3 weeks this point, but I'll still be around to pinch in at night if you guys ever need a little extra Stark magic.
And it's like, I don't know, the community's so cool about, I've been remote for so long, but like, it's amazing how available people are just to be able to answer a quick question during the day, and might not be able to take a look at my file or something, but like, just as long as you can articulate what you're trying to achieve or what's not working right, to someone who is knowledgeable, like they should be able to help you out even just through chat.
Sure. I'll do that. I'll also look at your files now. That's fine.
Cool.
But yeah, as long as you have a basic knowledge, someone would be like, hey, why does this thing disappear? Or why can't how do I make this disappear? Someone's like, oh, just go into here and click this button. You're like, oh, okay. Because Cinema 4D, there's a lot of buttons hidden that you can get lost in.
Yeah. It's a different, like when you work, all the Adobe stuff has like similar buttons and similar like workflow and with layers and all that kind of stuff. But then once you get outside the Adobe world, there it becomes a little bit harder because it's a completely different ecosystem and language.
Cool. Well, awesome, guys. Thanks for taking the time today to chat. Hopefully Jake and I get another podcast up soon, maybe after he's all moved and after my trip here, but we'll see what we can do. No promises. We never promised weekly. We never said monthly. We just have a podcast. So
that should be the name of the podcast.
We just have a podcast.
Yeah.
All right. Take care.
All right.